Are you a victim of addiction? Someone who tries to break free certain habits that bothers you day in and day out. Because in this fast-paced lifestyle, everyone is addicted to something. No one can escape that. Either it's your electronic devices that you use, or junk food, or substances. Whatever it may be, each and every one of us is addicted to something. What if I tell you that there is only one way that you can come out of it? You may have tried so many different ways to break free from these habits, but there's one medicine, there's one portion of medicine, and if you apply that medicine, trust us, you'll be able to break free from any addiction at all. So last week, we discussed that the sense of self that you feel, where does it reside? Is it something that you feel, or is it something that truly exists? If we recap on what we discussed last week, the sense of self that you feel, it has to either be in your body or in the mind. But we also discussed a collection of certain body parts arranged in a particular way is what we define as body. That is why sometimes you refer this body as I, especially when you say, I'm beautiful, I'm sick. But sometimes you define this as my arm is broken. My hair is not good today. So we have to admit that this I or my, it's not in the body itself. And then we also discussed whether the sense of self that you feel, or this I that you feel, whether it is in the mind. If I ask you to define who you are, how would you define yourself? Think of it. When you're eating something, you might feel, I'm eating. But what actually happens is you experience taste, isn't it? When you watch a movie, you might feel, I'm watching a movie. But if you truly dig into it, what actually happens is seeing happens, or sight. When you listen to music, you may feel that, oh, I listen to music. But isn't what truly happens is hearing? Think of it. If I ask you to define yourself, can you define yourself rather than sight or seeing, hearing? Can you define yourself apart from these 6 things that happens? Every time when you feel this sense of self, or every time when you feel that you exist, what truly happens is sight, hearing, tasting, smell, touch, or thinking. Apart from these 6 things, ladies and gentlemen, you can't define yourself. Whatever you do, whatever you feel like you do, everything can be categorized under these things. So you have to admit that sometimes you are seeing, sometimes you are hearing, sometimes you are tasting, sometimes you are smelling or thinking. But we also discussed how this sight happens. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you think you are seeing, that you exist and that you can see. But is it what truly happens? Is it you who is seeing, or is it just seeing? If you see what I'm holding right now, it is not you who is seeing this. Sight happens. We discussed it last week also, that when an object comes into contact with the faculty of eye, let's assume that this is the pen and that it comes into contact with the faculty of eye, mind arises to recognize what has come into contact with this faculty. This color that the mind perceives, it doesn't exist here. In fact, there is no possible way that you can ever experience these four great elements. What you have experienced so far in your life is what the mind perceives. Each time when you experience color, you have to realize that what you are experiencing is not what exists outside. We have no clue what exists outside because these faculties cannot perceive these four great elements. So whenever sight happens, we discussed that there is no need of a doer for this to happen. Even though there is no need of a doer for this to happen, when this happens, when you experience sight, you feel a sense of separation, you feel a sense of self, don't you? We promised last week that we will discuss how this sense of separation or how this sense of self happens when this aggregation process happens. Because this aggregation process is a natural process. When something comes into contact with the faculties, there is no possible way you could ever stop this minding process. This is how hearing happens, tasting happens, touch, smell. Even this is how thoughts arise in your mind. For any of these things to happen, there is no need of a doer. So where does this sense of self comes from? How does that happen? Let's have a look at it. So let's discuss how this sense of self happens, or how do you feel that? How do you feel this existence? Let's assume that this is a flower, and when it comes into contact with the faculty of eye, which gives rise to the mind, right? So this is what actually happens. And for this to happen, there is no need of a doer. But we feel a sense of separation, right? You feel that this is an entity. What you see is an entity. We never feel it as a process. So how does that happen is when this aggregation process happens, the defilement process hijack this aggregation process. So what is the defilement process? When the mind is ignorant, when the mind believes that things exist, that the separation is possible, entities exist, this is what ignorance is. So when the mind is ignorant, it gives rise to attachment. And what it does is, when this aggregation process happens, the defilement process hijacks this aggregation process, which gives a sense of separation or sense of self, which we also call as ego. Because when you believe that separation is possible, the mind wants to experience this separation. The mind wants to experience this sense of self, which we also call as ego. But the thing is, in this natural phenomenon, in this aggregation process, separation doesn't happen. This is just a process. So what it does is, attachment happens in the mind and vexation happens, because what you want is to feel the separation, but separation is not what happens. What happens is the aggregation process. And the mind begins to vex. And when relief of vexation happens, it gives a sense of separation, or it feels this ego. This is what happens all the time. This defilement process always hijacks this aggregation process, which leaves you with a sense of self. And when that happens, you feel that you need to do this, you need to do that you are a mother, that you are a father, that you are a doctor, you are a lawyer. All these things that you feel, that you think that you are, happens because of this ego. So let's talk about how this realization will help you come out from addiction. Ladies and gentlemen, only one chitta arises at one time. For an example, when you see this, the mind perceives a black color pen, right? But if I show you this, now do you perceive a black color pen, or do you perceive a white color pen? So what happened to the chitta that perceived the black color pen? Is it there when you recognize this? Of course not. And if I show you this duster, now the mind perceives a red color duster. What happened to the mind that perceived the black color pen? Is it there? It's not. When an object comes into contact with these faculties, mind arises to recognize that particular object. And the mind arises and it passes away. That is how you recognize the next object that comes into contact. So see, nothing is fixed, even though you feel that you have been existing throughout. It's not how it happens. Each and every moment, when these causes align, mind arises to recognize that object and it passes away. Again, a brand new chitta arises to recognize the next object that has come into contact. Ladies and gentlemen, you are nothing more than a chitta. Even though you believe that you are a doctor, that you are a woman, that you are a man, a mother, a father, you are nothing more than a chitta. This is what we have to understand. This is what we have to realize by hook or by crook, because that is the truth. Just imagine, a chitta arises to recognize the flower, okay? The next moment, let's imagine, you see a leaf. Now what happened to this chitta? Is it there when you recognize this? Of course not. Each and every moment, a new chitta arises to recognize these objects. This is when you're born. And it's gone. And now you're perceiving this pen. And it's also gone. Each and every moment is a brand new start. That's the first time you experience the world. But because of this defilement process, you feel an existence, a never-ending existence, which is far from the truth. Now let's see how to connect what we learned so far with addiction. Just think about how you got addicted. Were you addicted to anything when you were born? No, right? Let's think about junk food, something that people are addicted quite a lot these days. From children, it's an ageless addiction. Just imagine that you are addicted to junk food, okay? If I ask you, what's your view about junk food, what would you say? You would think that it's very pleasurable, right? It's very tasty. Isn't that the sort of idea that you have when you talk about junk food? Don't you feel that junk food or burgers, whatever, can truly make you happy? But if I ask you, how do you experience food? Let's imagine a burger. Okay. How do you experience a burger? It is either through sight, taste, smell, and touch, right? And of course, thoughts. This is how you experience a burger. Is there anything else how you could experience a burger? Can you think of any other way? Of course not. It's not possible. So it is either through sight, taste, smell, and touch and thoughts that you can experience a burger. So we discussed previously how sight happens. Are you seeing the true burger, or is it a mere manifestation of the mind? It's a mere manifestation of the mind. When causes come together, the burger, these colors that the mind perceives, is the manifestation. When those causes come together. What about the taste? Do you think you have ever tasted a burger? Do you think it's even possible? Ladies and gentlemen, you have never tasted a burger. What you have tasted so far is the creation of the mind. The taste is a construct of a mind. The taste that you think, the taste that you experience, it doesn't exist in the outside world. As I told you earlier also, there is no possible way you can ever experience these four great elements. When these molecules fit into the taste bud, the shapes of the taste buds, that is what gives rise to the mind. The taste that you perceive, the taste that you have experienced, it doesn't exist. When these causes come together, when it is aligned in a particular way, mind experience taste. So as we discussed earlier, sight happens. When sight happens, a chitta arises and passes away. Taste happens, another chitta arises and passes away. And when you feel the smell, another chitta arises and passes away. Ladies and gentlemen, all that happens in this world is chittas arises and pass away. That is all that happens. So tell me, sight happens and pass away. Taste happens and it passes away. See, you take the last bite of the burger, okay, and chittas accordingly arise and pass away. And those things will never arise again. But you have a perception in your mind that junk food is pleasurable, that it can give you happiness. But the thing is, you can't experience a burger without sight, taste, smell, touch, and thoughts. And they simply arise and pass away. So what you have to do next is, you will go back and get another burger, because you are trying to please a mind. Why you are trying to please a mind is because you don't know, because we are unaware of the process of the mind. When we think that I exist, then I'm trying to satisfy this sense of self. When is the last time you experienced it as a sense of self? Didn't you always try to satisfy you, thinking that you exist? That is why you can never come out of this addiction, because you are trying to please the mind by giving it what it wants, not knowing that a mind is simply a resultant of causes coming together, and they simply arise and pass away. If you understand that you can never satisfy a mind, if you understand that there is no fixed thing that you can satisfy, you will realize that trying to satisfy a mind that arises and passes away is utterly useless. That is how you will be able to come out of any addiction. And if someone asks, all right, mind is something that arises and passes away, but what about the pleasure that we feel when we eat a burger? We have discussed many times how pleasure arises. It is just a relief of vexation. We discussed that. That is why the Lord Buddha once said that if there is nothing called pleasure in this world, people will not go on in this samsara. But the very realization of pleasure is what will also help you stop this samsara. Because pleasure is nothing more than relief of vexation. And if you combine these two theories together and try to look at this world, try to reflect on this world with this reality, with this truth, you will realize that coming out of any addiction is not that difficult. Because it is not you who is addicted to anything. Because there is no you to get addicted to. It's just a sense of separation. If you look at whatever you experience through this process, you will realize that there is nothing to get attached to. And you will stop trying to give what this mind wants and trying to please yourself unnecessarily, because it's something that you can never do. That is why you are still trying to please yourself. Think about how many years you've been trying to please yourself. And if you're still doing the same thing, what you've done so far in your life has not fulfilled what you are aiming for. So take a new approach. After so many years of trying to please yourself, take a new approach and try and apply these teachings of the Supremely Enlightened One. Because this realization will set you free once and for all. So until we meet next week, take good care of yourself.